Airports are strange theaters. They take ordinary people, put them under fluorescent lights, long lines and short tempers, then let them play out dramas in front of strangers. But this wasn't just another tantrum in Terminal C. It began with a woman everyone in my neighborhood already knew too well, Karen Lane, our HOA president, self-proclaimed guardian of lawns and fences. At the gate, she wasn't wielding violation notices or threatening fines. Instead, she was demanding my seat 2A, first class, because in her mind, rules bend when she leans hard enough. I should have ignored it. Just another entitled flyer pushing past the line. But when you're a pilot deadheading in civilian clothes, you learn to read situations differently. Little details become warning lights, a tone of voice, a glance, a sudden insistence on bending the system. Karen's fight for a seat was more than pettiness. It was the opening move in something far larger and far more dangerous at 37,000 feet. There's no room for ego. One misstep can put hundreds of lives at risk. What started as a squabble over legroom would unravel into a conspiracy reaching from our quiet suburban streets straight into the sky, where every passenger on that flight would be unwillingly dragged into Karen's storm. The afternoon sun filtered through the wide glass windows of the airport, throwing pale rectangles of light across the polished floor. Passengers milled about the gate area, balancing paper cups of coffee, scrolling on their phones, or wrangling children who had long since grown restless. To most, Gate C12 was just another waiting room on the way to somewhere else. To me, it was the place where something familiar, something poisonous, stepped out of my quiet suburban street and into the sterile world of travel. Her name was Karen Lane. Back in our neighborhood, Karen wasn't just a person. She was an institution. The HOA president for as long as anyone could remember. She lived for power disguised as community order. She kept the bylaws close to her chest like a soldier clutching a rifle. Fence too high? She'd fine you. Lawn a little brown during summer? She'd shame you in the newsletter. She was the kind of woman who smiled during bake sales and bared her teeth during board meetings. And now, here she was, her voice slicing through the airport chatter like a siren. "I don't think you understand," she said to the gate agent, her tone sharp with condescension. "I am a platinum medallion member. I booked first class and seat 2A is my preferred seat." "There must be some mistake." The gate agent, Brenda, wore the patient smile of someone who had seen this scene 100 times before. Her hands flew across the keyboard, nails clicking against plastic. "Ma'am," she said evenly, "your reservation is for seat 3B. Seat 2A has already been assigned. The passenger has checked in. That passenger was me." I was sitting only a few feet away, blending in with my red polo, jeans, and running shoes. Not a captain in uniform, not someone carrying authority, just another traveler with a boarding pass. My ticket said seat 2A, a small luxury for airline crew deadheading to position for their next flight. I wasn't about to advertise my profession. Sometimes the best way to fly is invisibly, quietly, but invisibility doesn't protect you from Karen Lane. "Unassign him," she snapped, leaning over the counter. "I have status. I have medical needs. I require more legroom." I glanced at her shoes, sensible, chunky, with a hint of aggression, as if they'd been chosen for stomping rather than walking. She was 5'4" at best. Legroom wasn't her issue. Control was. Brenda didn't flinch. "Seat 3B also has ample legroom. That's the seat on your ticket." Her voice was calm but immovable. Airline agents know battles, and this one had the weight of a veteran. Karen's face darkened. "Unacceptable. I want your supervisor." I put my phone down. The performance was just beginning. A message pinged across my screen. It was from my wife, Lena. "You will not believe what the HOA just sent out," it read. "Karen's trying to push an emergency vote tonight. Zoning variance is something critical." I typed back quickly. "Funny you should mention her. The Queen herself is right in front of me, trying to steal my seat." Lena's reply was instant. A single exploding head emoji. Karen's performance escalated with the arrival of the supervisor. More titles, more firmness, same result. "Seat 2A is occupied, ma'am. You can take 3B or wait for the next flight." Checkmate. Karen grabbed her boarding pass, seething. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on me. For a second I considered looking away. Instead, I met her gaze with a neutral expression, The same one I'd use in a cockpit when the weather turned ugly. No aggression, no fear, just presence. She didn't recognize me, not as a pilot, not as her neighbor, not as anything but an obstacle. But her glare promised retaliation. Had seen it before at HOA meetings. When our neighbor Mike's roses stretched an inch past regulation, when families asked for leniency on fence colors, Karen's eyes always said the same thing. I will find a rule and I will use it to destroy you. Boarding was called. I let the crowd shuffle ahead. Brenda raised her radio and spoke softly but clearly. Escort the pilot. Her words carried a weight only airline staff understood. Some heads turned toward me, but I gave a small shake, declining pre-board. No need to draw attention. As I walked the jet bridge, I felt Karen's stare digging into my back. In my seat, I stowed my bag, opened a paperback, and prepared to tune out the world. But the whisper inside me, the one that had saved me more times than I could count, told me to stay alert. And then another figure entered the play. He wore a sharp suit that gleamed unnaturally, his hair slicked back like he'd been dipped in oil. A gold signet ring gleamed on his pinky, ostentatious and heavy. His boarding pass wasn't for first class, but he lingered by the forward galley, muttering urgently into his phone. The flight attendant, Sarah, had her back to him as she organized her crew bags. He accidentally bumped into her. Apologies spilled from his lips, smooth and oily. His hand, the one with the ring, brushed too close to her tote bag. A second, maybe too long enough to plant something. He smiled, dazzling and false, then disappeared into economy. My gut twisted. That wasn't clumsy. That was practiced. And suddenly Lena's text made more sense. A developer had been buying up property back home, trying to ram through a zoning change for high-density apartments. He needed the HOA support. Karen was his biggest ally. If she forced a vote tonight, half the neighborhood would be blindsided. The man with the ring was no ordinary businessman. He was the developer's fixer, and Karen was on her phone, texting furiously. Smiling to herself. I had no proof yet, but I had instinct. Something had been planted in that tote bag. Something that didn't belong. The engines roared as the plane taxied to the runway. My heartbeat matched the rhythm at altitude. The calm seemed ordinary. Drink service began. Karen complained loudly to her seatmate, her phone angled to livestream her grievances. Always an audience, always a performance. My phone buzzed again. Lena had sent a radar screenshot. A storm is building ahead. Ugly, the captain's voice soon confirmed it. Turbulence ahead. Seatbelts on. The plane began to shake, light bumps growing stronger. The air thickened with unease. Then Karen's call button rang frantically. Help. She shrieked. This man can't breathe. He's having a heart attack. Her seatmate slumped in his seat, eyes shut, pale. The timing was too perfect. A storm outside, a medical emergency inside. All while Karen broadcasted live. The flight attendants worked quickly, summoning a nurse and laying the man in the aisle. But he was conscious, breathing, and confused, not dying. Still, Karen fanned him theatrically, shouting for a doctor, blaming the airline, and narrating every second. And when the captain announced a diversion, our home airport, I understood everything. The storm was real. The medical call was staged. The planted item was leverage. This flight wasn't just about Karen's entitlement. It was about her bringing the fight for power in our neighborhood into the sky, endangering every single person on board. I gripped the armrest. The hum inside me was louder now. Urgent. Pay attention, because whatever the fixer had slipped into that bag, it was about to change everything. The cabin lights flickered as turbulence rocked the aircraft. The fastened seatbelt signs glowed bright, their chime drowned beneath Karen's shrill commentary. Unbelievable. She cried, phone in hand, recording herself while the man beside her lay across the aisle, clutching his chest. No proper medical staff on board, no supervisor in first class. This airline will hear from me. Her words weren't just for the flight attendants, they were for her livestream audience. I could see the comments flashing across her screen, emojis of shock and anger scrolling like ticker tape. She wasn't just reacting. She was performing, but the performance masked something else. The man, mid-40s, thinning hair, neatly dressed, looked far too alert for someone in cardiac arrest. His breathing was steady, eyes darting quickly beneath half-closed lids, scanning the crew's movements. He was pretending, following a script, and Karen was the director. The flight attendants moved with urgent precision. One prepared the oxygen tank, another dug for the defibrillator, their training kicking in like clockwork. A young nurse rushed from the back, announcing her credentials, kneeling by the man's side. She checked his pulse, then frowned. "He's stable. Vitals are fine." "I don't think this is a heart attack," she said firmly, but Karen wasn't having it. She raised her voice higher, pushing the narrative. "He's in shock. He needs immediate attention. We must land now." The captain's calm voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to a medical emergency and worsening weather, we'll be diverting to our home base. Please remain seated and buckled." A ripple of unease spread through the cabin. Diverting meant delays, missed connections, and costs. Passengers grumbled, but turbulence silenced them. The plane jolted hard, trays rattling, coffee spilling. Outside the windows, lightning carved white scars across the night. I leaned back, trying to appear casual, but my mind was working fast. This was more than bad luck. Karen's sudden emergency, her fixer's suspicious brush with the tote bag, Lena's text about the zoning vote, it all connected. The diversion wasn't about saving a life. It was about getting this plane, this crew, and Karen back to our city tonight. The emergency was a lever to force the detour. Once on the ground, she could rally the board, push her vote, and hand our neighborhood to developers on a silver platter, but that didn't explain the bag. The tote sat innocently in the galley, just a few feet from where Sarah and another attendant secured supplies. I replayed the moment, the fixer's slick apology, the subtle brush of his ringed hand. He hadn't been clumsy, he'd been deliberate. Whatever he planted, Karen needed it in her hands before we landed. The turbulence worsened. Oxygen masks dropped briefly before retracting again. Gasps filled the cabin. Karen seized the chaos, standing despite warnings, waving her phone like a torch. "This airline is endangering lives? Look at this poor man. Look at this storm. They don't care about us." Passengers stared, some muttering, others nodding, swept into her hysteria. Fear is contagious, and Karen knew how to spread. I'd unclip my seatbelt just enough to lean into the aisle. "Ma'am," I said, loud enough for those nearby, "the medical professional has confirmed he's fine. Please sit down for your safety." Her eyes snapped to mine. Recognition flickered, not of who I was, but that I was resisting her script. For a moment, her lips curled into the same HOA smirk she wore when cornering residents at meetings. "You don't get to tell me what to do," she hissed, and then the man on the floor opened one eye. Just for a second, his gaze locked with Karen's. It wasn't pain in his eyes, it was confirmation. A signal the nurse hadn't noticed. The attendants were distracted by the storm. But I saw it, the emergency was staged. The fixer had planted something in that tote, and Karen was orchestrating the whole act, right here in first class, while a storm raged outside. As the plane shuddered violently, overhead bins rattling, one thought cut through the noise. If I didn't act soon, this diversion wouldn't just delay us. It would deliver us straight into Karen's trap. The plane pitched downward, jolting hard enough to knock a few drinks onto laps. Nervous laughter filled the cabin, the kind of brittle sound people make when fear starts eating at the edges of reason. Somewhere behind me, a child cried. Oxygen masks trembled in their compartments, threatening to fall again, but in the middle of it all, Karen Lane stood like a conductor at the head of her orchestra, voice raised above the storm. "This is negligence," she shrieked, phone raised, live comments pouring in from her digital audience. "The airline is endangering us. This man could die, and they refuse to divert fast enough. You'll all see this online tonight." Her seatmate, the victim, still lay in the aisle. His color looked fine, his pulse steady, but his eyes flicked open every few seconds, connecting with Karen's like they were sharing cues in a play. He wasn't sick. He was part of the act, and then there was the bag. Sarah, the lead attendant, had secured her tote just beside the galley door. It looked ordinary enough, faded navy canvas stuffed with the usual crew belongings. But my memory kept circling back to the fixer in the slick suit. His hand grazing the bag hadn't been an accident. He'd slipped something inside. Something Karen needed. The storm outside battered us, but the real storm was coiled in that tote. I unbuckled discreetly, leaning forward, keeping my movements calm. Years in the cockpit had taught me that panic is contagious, but so is control. I wanted the passengers around me to see calmness. Not escalation, sir, Sarah called, noticing me rise. Please remain seated. We're in heavy turbulence. I gave her a small, professional nod, lowering my voice just enough. I'm crew, deadheading. Something's wrong with your bag. Her eyes widened slightly, trained to catch the nuance in a passenger's tone. She didn't ask questions, she just glanced at the tote, then back at me. After turbulence eases, she mouthed, but Karen noticed. Of course she did. What are you whispering about? She demanded, turning her camera toward me. Are you with them? Covering for this airline's negligence? The phone lens focused on my face. I kept my expression blank, but the red light told me I was live to her audience. That was her real weapon, not the storm, not the fake emergency, but the thousands of viewers eating up her every word. I ignored the camera. I had bigger problems, the sick man coughed theatrically, clutching his chest again. The nurse checked his vitals, frustration on her face. He's fine. This isn't cardiac. Something's of. Karen seized the moment, voice dripping with authority. Clearly, you're incompetent. This man needs real doctors. We must land immediately, the captain's voice returned, steady but strained. Folks, we'll be on the ground in 20 minutes. Crew, prepare the cabin. Karen smirked like she had won. She slid her phone into her purse, satisfied her livestream had planted the right seeds. Then, as turbulence gave us a brief reprieve, she stood, unsteady but determined, and strode toward the galley straight to Sarah's tote. I was on my feet before she reached it. Ma'am, sit down, I said firmly, my pilot's voice slipping out. Not loud, not angry, commanding. She froze, glaring at me. You don't tell me what to do. Passengers leaned into the aisle. Sensing a confrontation, Karen's hand darted toward the tote. I grabbed her wrist mid-motion. The bag tipped, spilling slightly, and for a split second I saw it, a small black device, metallic, with blinking lights barely visible through fabric. Not drugs. Not papers. Something electronic. Karen gasped, yanking back her arm. Assault. Did you see that? He assaulted me, she cried, voice pitched high, desperate to flip the narrative. Some passengers shouted in confusion. Phones came out, recording, but Sarah had seen it too. Her eyes locked on the blinking device. She moved fast, snapping the bag shut and pulling it behind her, shielding it from Karen. What is this? She hissed. Karen's face twisted. That's mine. Personal property. He has no rig. No, I cut in, calm but sharp. That was planted. The man in the suit. I saw it. Sarah paled. Flight attendants are trained for fires, medicals, and turbulence. Not blinking devices slipped into their bags by strangers. The sick man in the aisle sat up suddenly, all pretense gone. His eyes darted to Karen, then to me, then back to the bag. He wasn't her victim, he was her partner. Passengers gasped as he stood. Surprisingly steady for someone who'd been dying minutes ago. Karen snapped at him. Get it back. Now the plane jolted again, lightning flashing outside, casting her face in harsh white. Everything clicked at once. The device wasn't just leverage. It was a tool. A signal jammer, maybe, or something designed to disrupt. Karen's fixer had slipped it on board, and now Karen and her accomplice were trying to retrieve it mid-flight. Storm outside, the diversion. The staged emergency. It was all cover, and I was the only one who'd seen through it. The aisle felt narrower than ever. Passengers pressed back into their seats, filming and whispering. The crew froze between protocol and instinct. Karen's voice rose again, dripping venom. You're not crew. You're nobody. Sit down before you make this worse. But her words no longer held control. Too many had seen the device, and too many had watched the sick man rise without struggle. The façade was cracking. I stepped forward, planting myself between Karen and the galley. My voice dropped to the calm register I used in emergencies, the one drilled into me during simulations of fire. Loss of power and rapid decompression. Ma'am. Sit down. Now her lips curled, eyes blazing. She wasn't going to yield, not to me, not to anyone. And that was when the plane lurched violently, lights dimming and oxygen masks finally dropping for real this time. Screams filled the cabin. The storm had swallowed us whole. The device slid halfway out of the tote, blinking faster now, as if the turbulence had triggered it. Karen lunged. I lunged faster, and in that moment, with 200 souls on board and the sky itself tearing at our wings, the conflict that had started with a stolen seat reached its breaking point. The cabin plunged into chaos. The storm outside screamed against the fuselage, rattling the windows like fists on glass. Oxygen masks dangled, swaying wildly. Passengers clutched them with trembling hands, eyes wide with panic. The aircraft dipped sharply, the floor tilting as trays and cups clattered to the ground, and at the heart of it all, Karen, she lunged for the tote, fingers curled like claws. The device glowed brighter now, tiny lights pulsing faster. Like a heartbeat running wild, I intercepted her, gripping her wrist again. But this time she didn't cry, "Assault," she snarled, teeth bared, fighting with a ferocity I hadn't expected. She wasn't pretending anymore. "This isn't yours," she spat. "You don't understand what's at stake." Passengers gasped, filming, whispering. Some clung to their masks, others to their children. But nobody moved to help her. The mask had slipped. This wasn't an HOA president fighting for legroom. This was something darker. Her accomplice, the sick man, surged forward, aiming straight for Sarah, who was clutching the bag to her chest. His face was cold now, stripped of theatrics. He wanted the device, and he was willing to knock down a flight attendant to get it. I moved instinctively, shoving Karen aside and blocking his path. We collided in the narrow aisle, our shoulders slamming against seats. He swung, a clumsy punch thrown more in desperation than skill. I ducked, years of training and crisis reflexes kicking in, and drove my shoulder into his gut, forcing him back. The plane jolted again, throwing us both against the armrests. A passenger screamed as their drink splattered across their lap. The storm roared, but inside it was Karen's voice that pierced everything. "Do you all see this?" she shouted, twisting toward the nearest phone camera. "He's attacking us. He's a danger to this flight." But her words rang hollow now. Too many eyes had seen the accomplice rise from his fake collapse. Too many had seen the device. And the fear in passengers' faces wasn't directed at me anymore. It was at her. The nurse, still kneeling with an unused defibrillator, spoke up sharply. "She's lying. That man isn't sick. They're trying to get that bag." It was the break we needed, passengers murmured in agreement. Someone shouted, "Sit down, lady." Another yelled, "We saw the lights! What is that thing?" Karen faltered. For the first time, her control slipped. Her gaze darted, calculating, searching for a new angle. But Sarah moved quickly, handing the tote to another attendant, who secured it in a locked compartment at the galley. Karen screamed, "No, you don't know what you've done." The accomplice shoved me off, lunging again. But this time, two passengers rose from their seats, men in their 30s, built like athletes, and grabbed him, forcing him down. His legs kicked wildly, but they pinned him. Karen shrieked, spinning toward the bag, but I caught her arm again, twisting it behind her back with just enough pressure to immobilize without harm. "Enough," I said, my voice low but carrying. "Sit down." Now, the authority in my tone wasn't just anger. It was years of command in cockpits, years of keeping calm when alarms blared and lives depended on steady hands. For the first time, Karen hesitated. Her body trembled, not from turbulence, but from realization her performance was collapsing. The captain's voice thundered over the intercom. "Brace, severe turbulence. Everyone, heads down, masks on." The aircraft dropped suddenly, stomachs lurching into throats. Passengers screamed, clutching armrests, oxygen masks pressing tight against faces. The lights flickered, the storm battering us with violent fists of air. Karen stumbled, losing her balance. I shoved her into a seat, strapping her in before buckling myself down. Her eyes blazed with hatred. "You ruined everything," she hissed. "Do you know what that device was for?" It wasn't a bomb, it was proof. Proof of how corrupt this airline is, how unsafe. With that video, I would have had them by the throat. I would have won. Her confession chilled me more than the storm outside. She hadn't wanted to destroy the plane, she'd wanted chaos, scandal, and leverage. A staged emergency, a planted device, a live-stream narrative. Power built on fear, but she hadn't cared if lives dangled in the balance. The storm howled, the plane rattling like a tin can. But slowly, agonizingly slowly, the descent smoothed. The engines roared steady again, guiding us through the worst of it. The crew moved quickly, checking passengers, calming sobs. And securing the cabin, the accomplice was restrained with flex cuffs, his head bowed in defeat. Karen sat rigid, eyes burning holes into me, but her voice was gone. Her audience had turned on her. Sarah crouched beside me, whispering, "What's in that bag?" I shook my head. "We'll let security handle it." But it wasn't supposed to be on this plane. The rest of the flight stretched long, tension hanging heavy, but the storm outside eased as we approached the runway. The landing was rough but safe, tires screeching against wet asphalt. Passengers erupted into nervous applause, relief spilling over. Police and federal agents met us at the gate. The accomplice was hauled off first, silent now. Karen followed, still sputtering about conspiracies, but her words fell on deaf ears. Phones with hours of footage had captured the truth. I slipped quietly through the crowd, blending into the stream of weary passengers. Nobody needed to know I'd been a pilot off duty. Nobody needed thanks, but as I walked past the gate, Lena's message buzzed again. "The zoning vote's been delayed." Karen didn't show. "Something happened?" I typed back, "Yeah, something happened. I'll explain later." I pocketed my phone, stepping into the terminal. The storm outside had passed, but I knew one thing. Karen Lane's rain, whether over our neighborhood or over a plane at 37,000 feet, was finally grounded. The rain had slowed to a drizzle by the time I walked out of the terminal. The storm that had shaken our plane was drifting east, leaving the tarmac glistening like black glass under the floodlights. Passengers around me hugged loved ones, wiped tears, and laughed nervously, the sound of people who just realized how close they'd come to disaster. I didn't wait for applause, recognition, or even a thank you. I just wanted quiet. After 12 hours of adrenaline spikes, of watching a neighborhood feud spiral into something that could have cost lives, the last thing I needed was to relive it through more questions, but quiet didn't last long. My phone buzzed again. It was Lena. They just adjourned the HOA meeting. Karen's not here, and without her, the developer lost his push for the zoning vote. People are actually celebrating. What's going on? I paused, watching a police car pull away with tinted windows. I didn't have to guess who was inside. I typed back, "Long story." Karen won't be running any meetings for at home that night. Lena made tea while I sat at the kitchen table, still in the same red polo and jeans I'd boarded the plane in. The house smelled like cardamom and safety. She listened quietly as I told her everything: the gate scene, the man with the gold ring, the planted device, the fake heart attack, and the diversion. Karen's unraveling in the storm. When I finished, she set her cup down, eyes wide. She risked a plane full of people. For a zoning vote? Not just the vote, I said. She wanted leverage. A spectacle. Something she could twist into proof that she was right, that the airline was unsafe, and that she was the only one who saw it. And with the developer backing her, she thought she'd have the neighborhood in her pocket. Lena shook her head slowly. She's worse than I thought. And I thought she was terrible. We both laughed, a tired laugh, the kind that comes when relief finally outweighs news spread fast. By the next morning, everyone in our subdivision knew Karen Lane had been detained at the airport under federal custody. Nobody knew the full details. The airline wasn't releasing specifics, but the neighborhood didn't need them. People pieced together enough from live-stream snippets, passenger videos, and the sudden silence from Karen's usually loud HOA emails. By the afternoon, residents gathered in the cul-de-sac for an impromptu meeting. Without Karen's gavel banging, without her sharp voice cutting people off, the atmosphere felt lighter. Mike, the neighbor whose roses she'd once declared out of compliance, was the first to speak. "So, I guess we need a new HOA president?" Nervous chuckles rippled through the group. For the first time in years, people weren't afraid of being fined for lawn heights or trash bins left out too long. I didn't volunteer. I'd had enough responsibility for a while. But others stepped up, fair-minded, reasonable folks who wanted to keep the neighborhood functioning without turning it into a battleground. Karen's absence wasn't just noticeable. It was freeing. 2 weeks later, word came down officially. Karen Lane was banned for life from the airline. Federal investigators were reviewing her role in the Mitter incident, her connection to the developer, and the suspicious device that, thankfully, turned out to be non-lethal, a hacked electronic meant to trigger alarms, not explosions. Dangerous enough to terrify? For weeks after the flight, I caught myself replaying moments, the clink of the bin latch, the glint of the gold ring, and the look in Karen's eyes when she realized the crowd wasn't buying her lies anymore. I thought about what it meant to be responsible for people even when you weren't on duty. Pilots are trained to spot the small details that others overlook because small details keep planes in the sky. But that day had taught me something else. Sometimes the biggest danger isn't mechanical. It's human. Karen believed rules were weapons, meant to bend others while protecting herself. On the ground, that had meant fines and notices. In the air, it had nearly meant disaster, but entitlement doesn't fly. Not when 180 souls are strapped into a metal tube, trusting each other to get safely from one side of a storm to the other one evening. Weeks later, I walked through the neighborhood. Kids rode bikes without worrying about Karen yelling at them for being too close to the curb. Neighbors waved from porches, smiling in ways I hadn't seen in years. Mike's roses bloomed tall, untrimmed, red, and defiant against the fence line. He caught me admiring them and grinned. "Guess they're legal now," I laughed. "Guess so." When I got home, Lena handed me a letter. It was from the HOA, now under interim leadership. They wanted to thank me for my years of patience under Karen's reign and to ask if I'd consider helping draft fairer, simpler guidelines for everyone for the first time. HOA business didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like community. A month later, I was back in uniform, walking down another jet bridge with another flight ahead. The hum of engines filled me with calm the way it always did as passengers boarded. I caught snippets of conversation, people worried about delays, seat assignments, and legroom. The usual noise, but I also thought of that storm, of the night entitlement nearly turned fatal, of the moment when truth outweighed performance. Flying, I realized, wasn't just about charts and instruments. It was about people, their flaws, their fears, and their unexpected courage. And sometimes it was about standing up, even in jeans and a red polo, when everyone else just wanted to look away. Karen Lane would never fly again. But the rest of us? We'd keep moving forward, through storms, through noise, through turbulence. Because that's what flying is, not the absence of chaos, but the determination to rise above it. Adjusted my tie, straightened my jacket, and stepped into the cockpit. "Let's get them home," I said, and for once, the skies ahead felt clear. Now I ask you, if you were on that flight, would you have given up your seat to Karen or stood your ground?